Right now, somewhere, a person is sitting on a porcelain seat, scrolling a phone, doing the one thing every human who has ever lived has had to do. You do it too, every single day. And you have wrapped that simple act in privacy, in plumbing, in soft paper and closed doors, until it feels like the most ordinary, forgettable moment of your day. But stop and think about it for a second. That porcelain throne you sit on is almost brand new. For nearly the entire human story, it did not exist. No toilet, no pipes, no flush. So what did your ancestors actually do? The answer is stranger, older, and far more important than you would ever guess. Because the humble act of relieving yourself quietly shaped human health, human cities, and even the way your own body is built. Let us start with the most basic question. How did they even position themselves? The answer is that they squatted. They dropped into a deep, flat-footed squat, knees high, and stayed there. And here is the surprising part. That was not a crude, primitive posture. It may have been the correct one. Your body is quite literally built for it. Wrapped around the lower end of your bowel is a muscle called the puborectalis. When you stand or sit upright, that muscle pulls the bowel into a kink, like a bent garden hose, holding everything in. This is useful. It is what stops accidents. But when you need to go, that kink has to straighten out. And here is the thing your modern bathroom never tells you. Sitting only opens that angle part way. Squatting opens it almost completely. A physician named Dov Sakirov actually tested this. He had volunteers go in 3 different positions and measured the effort. The result was clear. People who squatted emptied their bowels faster, with far less straining than those who sat. Your ancestors, crouched in the bushes, were not suffering through a primitive inconvenience. They were doing it in the one position your anatomy was designed for. It is the modern seat, oddly, that fights your own body. But posture is only the beginning, because the real question is not how they did it. It is where all of that waste went, and what it did to them. For most of human history, the answer was simple. It went on the ground, out in the open, wherever you happened to be. When your ancestors lived as small, roaming bands of hunter-gatherers, this was not a problem. The group was tiny, they were always moving. They would leave their waste behind and walk on, and nature would quietly break it down. A handful of people spread across a vast landscape leaves almost no trace. And then, everything changed. Humans stopped roaming. They settled down. They built villages, then towns, then cities. And for the first time in history, thousands of people were living, eating, and relieving themselves in the same small space, day after day, year after year. This created a brand new kind of danger, one no wandering forager had ever faced. The problem is that human waste is not just unpleasant, it is a highway for disease. It carries the eggs of parasites and the bacteria behind illnesses like cholera and dysentery. When it contaminates the water you drink or the food you grow, it can quietly devastate an entire population. And the archaeologist Piers Mitchell at Cambridge has spent years uncovering exactly this hidden cost. By studying ancient toilets and soil, he and other researchers have shown that as humans settled into farming and crowded together, the burden of intestinal parasites actually went up, not down. Civilization, in a strange way, made us sicker before it made us safer. So the story of ancient toilets is really the story of a slow, desperate war against our own waste. The earliest solutions were beautifully simple. Dig a hole. A pit latrine, a hole in the ground, is one of the oldest pieces of sanitation technology on Earth, and billions of people still rely on the same basic idea today. From there, ancient cultures grew astonishingly clever. Some of the oldest cities in the world, thousands of years ago, built homes with drains that carried waste out into covered channels beneath the streets. The Romans later built vast public latrines, long stone benches with rows of open holes, where citizens would sit side by side in the open and chat. Privacy, that thing you now consider essential, would have baffled them. But here's a twist you might not expect. All that cleverness did not always make people cleaner. Take those grand Roman toilets. You would assume that a civilization with public latrines, sewers, and heated baths would have crushed the parasite problem. Yet when researchers examined the remains, they found the opposite. Roman-era populations were riddled with intestinal worms, just as much as the people who came before their plumbing. The shared sponges they used to clean themselves, the warm communal baths, the waste used to fertilize crops, all of it kept the parasites circulating. They had the technology. They had not yet understood the invisible enemy. Germs would not be discovered for well over 1,000 more years. Now, all of this raises a question. If ancient waste was such a problem, how do we even know all this? That stuff is long gone. It rotted away thousands of years ago. Except sometimes it did not. In rare, dry, or waterlogged conditions, human waste can survive for thousands of years, hardening into something scientists call a coprolite, fossilized feces. And to an archaeologist, a coprolite is not disgusting. It is treasure. Because sealed inside is a perfect snapshot of a single ancient day. What that person ate, the seeds and bones of their last meals, the parasites living in their gut, even fragments of their own DNA. At a site called the Paisley Caves in Oregon, the archaeologist Dennis Jenkins uncovered ancient human coprolites so old and so well preserved that the DNA inside them became some of the earliest direct evidence of humans in the Americas. Think about that for a moment. One of the most important clues to how people first reached an entire hemisphere was, quite literally, ancient poop. The thing your ancestors left behind and never thought about again became a message across 14,000 years. So let us return to that person on the porcelain seat, scrolling their phone. To you, this morning. What you are doing is not timeless at all. The private room, the clean water, the flush that makes it all vanish, these are astonishingly recent gifts, built on thousands of years of disease, trial, and hard-won understanding. Your ancestors squatted in the open in the posture your body still secretly prefers. They left their waste on the land, then in pits, then in sewers, fighting an invisible war against parasites they could not see. And a few of them, by pure accident, left behind tiny time capsules that would one day tell us who they were, what they ate, and where they came from. You flush it away without a thought, but for almost all of human history, what you leave behind was not something to be hidden. It was, in the end, one of the most honest records a human being could ever leave.